Welcome to Anonymous Hedgehog, Episode 2. I'm Rich.
And I'm Maya.
And today we're going to be talking about the importance of listening and receptiveness. So I actually got this idea from reading a book called How to Win Friends and Influence People. And basically the entirety of the book is that in order to be a good conversationalist and in order to be liked by other people, you actually have to do the opposite of what most people think is true, which is to make yourself more interesting. In fact, the book says you need to focus on what the other person is saying and really tune into them to the point where you're not even saying much. And that's where the best conversations come out. So I thought that was a really interesting point. I was wondering, what do you think about that?
I think it's so interesting that you bring this up because I feel like this happens a lot. Like, we're not listening to what other people are saying because we're so focused on what we're going to say next. Like, we don't even realize that it happens. It's like if you ever, if someone ever introduces themselves to you and then you immediately forget their name because, like, you were focusing on what you were going to say next.
Yeah.
And, like, I feel like this happens to me a lot. I think it's just we don't even realize that we do it. That's like an interesting point that you bring up because it's definitely like it's ingrained in kind of our culture and like just the way we communicate. We don't actually, we're planning like how to make ourselves coherent that we don't actually listen to what someone else is saying.
Yeah. And this kind of ties back to our last episode about activism, where people are so conditioned to always sort of spread their views. You know, we're taught from an early age, like, be a leader, not a follower. And that sort of implies, like, obviously the follower listens to the leader. And so by pushing that you need to be a leader, not a follower, we're also sort of insinuating that you should spread your views instead of listen to others. And, you know, that might be kind of toxic.
I think a lot of it is also because, like, the leaders and, like, the people that we look up to, a lot of them have a lot, like, what's called, like, type A personalities, where they're, like, you know, they're more outgoing and they're just very driven, and they... like, the people who we see in our culture are all, like, very extroverted, and they tend to be very good at speaking. They tend to be very articulate. And I guess the more or introverted or the more, like, quieter kind of leaders, the people in the background, you just don't see them on, like, the media and stuff. And so we're not exposed to that at a young age. And so our role models are all people who are very charismatic, right? Who are very charming, who present themselves very well. But we don't actually focus on listening to other people when we try to make ourselves into someone like that.
Yeah, so that's interesting that you brought up charisma, because I don't know if you've heard of him. There's a YouTuber called, like, Charisma on Command.
Yeah, I do watch that. Okay.
I love that YouTuber. Yeah. I think we watch a lot of similar YouTube channels. Yeah. Yeah, so Charisma on Command, and also the book I mentioned earlier, they mentioned charisma too, and surprisingly, they say that, like, your charisma comes out of the way you listen to other people. And honestly, I think I've seen that too. The people that I am most inclined to talk to are the people who talk least about themselves and give me the most attention. And it seems conceited to say, but I guess there's a split between media charisma and real life charisma. And media charisma is more of, you know, like, oh, it's the loudest person and they're the most, like, alpha on the TV show. They're speaking the most. But real life, you kind of just want someone to be able to listen to you.
And it's also kind of crazy, like, when you talk about charisma, like, how much charisma impacts our perception of a person. Like, if you think about, like, politicians, our elected officials, our, you know, office managers, all these people, like, we judge them mostly on charisma. Like, when we, like, charisma is so important, like, when you're running for office. And, like, you can see this, like, with elections and, like, obviously the different presidential elections, like, charisma plays a huge role. And if you're just a boring person and you're not, like, energetic, people don't want to vote for you. People don't want to take time out of their day and go to the booths. But I feel like it's kind of like a double-edged sword. Like, charisma is something that is super dangerous because, so you know, like, Elizabeth Holmes, like, that Silicon Valley, like, basically she was a fraud who I think she took 1 year or, like, a semester at Stanford or something, and then she thought she could start her own, like, biotech company, and, like, she could get blood samples from just, like, a drop of blood. And so, like, the interesting thing about her was, like, she was incredibly charismatic, and that's how she basically, like, she pretended to have a company and to have, like, real science behind her vision when she didn't actually have anything, and how she was basically like built this like $1 billion empire that was just like a huge like
Like a
fraud.
scam, yeah. Yeah.
Yeah, it's like she was like a huge fraud. So I think like we often get so blinded by charisma and just like so blinded by like the way that our first impressions of people that we don't take into account their actual credentials and things like that.
That's interesting because in that case, like charisma can be dangerous, I guess. You know, people can be very, very, what's the word? Like a sociopath, right? Someone who's great in society, but then has like bad intentions inside. That's an interesting point. And I've always sort of wondered, like, how can you tell a sociopath from like someone else?
This is so funny. Like actually last year in psych class, there was this like quote or basically like our teacher was talking about this, like someone tweeted that like Trump was like a sociopath and she was just like, yeah, there's basically a study that like pretty much every politician is a sociopath.
Oh, really?
Because you have to be a sociopath to like willingly put yourself in that kind of situation because you're basically like seeking attention from other people, right? You kind of have to be a sociopath in order to like that has to be your personality in order to run for office. And that was just kind of interesting.
Yeah. And that's also interesting. Like when you put this under the scope of politicians, I feel like the way a politician is charismatic is very different from the way me or you are charismatic at like a dinner event or something. Like for a politician, I think it's all about being, you know, headstrong, and sometimes like controversy increases the charisma of a politician because it's like, oh my gosh, like he was able to say that or she was able to say that. Like I would never say that in front of so many people. That increases their charisma. But like at like a dinner party, like the drunk uncle spewing random controversy is not charismatic. It's more like the person who's put together, who's going along with society's norms.
Yeah, I think a lot of it has to do, like, especially when you're telling, like, I guess funny or it's like something that's meant to be a joke. A lot of it has to do with comedic timing. Because if you see, like, I feel like the best jokes are the ones that like just cross the line enough where you're like, wow, I can't believe they said that. But you have to like say it in a very specific way so that your audience actually laughs. Because if you just say it like too bluntly, it sounds too serious and they're just like, oh wow, that's like pretty offensive. But if you say it in like the right comedic timing, it can be extremely like hilarious. We'll burst out laughing.
Yeah, dude, comedic timing is so undervalued. Like I used to give like speeches and things like that, like competitively, and like the biggest thing I learned was how important comedic timing was. Literally the same joke said in the same way can get either the entire room laughing or can get no one laughing just based on how long you pause. And that difference can be like 1 or 2 seconds. And so the problem is the longer you pause, the more awkward it feels and the less charismatic you feel, but the more charismatic you actually are. So I guess there's a disconnect between like internal charisma or what you feel is charismatic and external charisma of what other people think of you.
Yeah. So like, I guess our original topic was about like listening to people, right? I was actually kind of curious as to, you can actually move this kind of back into the political sphere. Like, at what point should you like not listen to someone? Like when you're hearing out other people's opinions, right? Like a lot of people say like, oh, I don't owe this person, like I don't owe like hearing this person out because their opinion is so ridiculous, right? So like, where do we draw that like line as like when you should hear someone out and when you should just like blatantly dismiss your opinion? Like, should we even like hear out flat earthers to see if they like, you know, just like listen to their arguments?
That's a really good point. Yeah, because again, like, and that goes along with like the cancel culture thing we were talking about last time. Like, people are so quick to just say, like, no, I'm not listening to you. Honestly, I think it has to do with like what the argument is and how it's structured. So I know given any political topic, there's only a limited set of arguments that go along with that political topic. And if that argument goes along with something that you've heard before and you, based on your experiences, your personality, what you felt before, if you disagree with that and you've already heard the argument, I think it's fair to say, no, I'm not going to listen to it.
You say that there's only a limited number of ways that you can argue like a political topic. That's kind of interesting. Like, what do you mean by that?
So this might be a little bit, I guess limiting, because I like to think of things in a very binary yes/no way. And so when we talk about politics, even though it's a very broad spectrum and people can say there's like an umbrella of unlimited arguments you can draw for any side and you can convince anyone of anything, like, well, if that was true, there wouldn't be only two political parties, like, or two like main political parties that people fall under. Clearly there has to be some limit. Let's call that like N. Like, there's a limit N number of arguments that you can draw for any given subtopic within a political party's agenda. And because there's such a limited amount of arguments you can draw, it's really easy for people to draw party lines. And I think that's why our country is so polarized as well.
Well, I think that there are a limited number of arguments, but I don't necessarily think that the two-party system is really representative of that. I feel like the two-party system is really just because of like the way our voting system works, like how it's like winner takes all, and like, you know, these things like that, where you can't like rank the votes. Like in some countries you can like rank like your first preference and your second preference, whatever. I feel like the way that our political system kind of works just doesn't like heed to like a third party being able to successfully make a run. But I do think that that's interesting. I think that there are kind of like, it's interesting. Like, do you think that like those political parties like shape our thinking, or our thinking shapes those political parties?
Oh, that's a really interesting.
Because I feel like it's come to the point where like the political parties has almost shaped our thinking, you know? Like, I think of something like, oh, is this like a liberal or conservative viewpoint, right?
Yeah.
But really it's like these things are just arbitrary. Like, we just came up with these things for the sake of like elections and whatever. Like, really there could be like a huge spectrum of like what people believe.
Yeah. And have you ever like searched up in Google like what is the Republican stance on this issue, just so that you can like align with it, or the other way around?
Yeah. That's like, it's so weird that like we like it's like made our thinking into this binary because the system exists this way.
I think it definitely biases it, but I think people are aware that it biases it. Like how many times have you heard someone say, oh, like, I'm socially a Democrat, but like economically I'm a Republican? Like, how many times have you heard that?
Yeah, that's like,
that's
definitely a lot.
In fact, I think that's a more common viewpoint than believing in either of the parties wholeheartedly. Like, I feel like people are always a mix of the two, but it's just like what gets the most of you, and I feel like you're forced to decide.
I feel like it's almost like a chicken or the egg question. It's because like our thinking made those political parties, but now those political parties like turns around and shapes our thinking, if that makes sense.
Yeah. The question is like, what came first? Yeah, that's interesting.
I don't know. Do you think that like, well, obviously right now our political like arena is incredibly polarized, but I feel like in my opinion, like maybe like 4 years ago in 2016, I thought that this would like allow for a third party candidate to maybe come out, like, because people are so dissatisfied within their own party. I thought that this would kind of like lead to a fundamental change in the party system or something like at least along those lines. But I feel like it's almost made people more polarized towards their party versus like willing to accept a third party or something like that.
Yeah, it's because like within a party itself, let's say at best someone stands for 70% of what that party believes in. Even though they disagree with the 30%, the fact that their party is the only one standing up for the 70% and the other party has strayed away from that 70% so much, I think just makes them even more loyal to that party.
Do you think that like there is going to be a chance that like this two-party system could ever change in the US?
No,
or like people will like their thinking won't be so like liberal, conservative, Democrat, Republican anymore.
I don't think so. I think there needs to be a really strong external force that literally
Really?
shifts the way of the education system. Because, I mean, we learned about this in school. Like, what is the biggest factor towards determining what party a person aligns with? And I think the number one answer was like family life. Like what is playing on your television when you're eating dinner? What is subconsciously being spewed into your mind? And then social media as well. And like families are always going to pass down their views, and then social media is going to spew what the society believes in, and the society believes in what the individual families that make up that society believe in. So I think we're just stuck in like a perpetual cycle of just getting more and more polarized.
Yeah, I feel that way too, but it just feels so like pessimistic to think that way, because like it's just gonna get worse and worse and worse, right? Like there's like I can't think of, like, as much as I want the system to change, like I can't think of anything that could possibly change it. Like it's just become so ingrained in our like lives.
What's interesting about that is like if we're getting more and more polarized, right? Like that means I would disagree more with the contrary party, and the contrary party would disagree more with me. So would that mean we're listening to each other more and we're sharing our opinions more? And would that be grounds for a better spread of ideas and diplomatic discussion? Or would that just facilitate stronger arguments and more polarization?
So I think we're definitely sharing our opinions more. I feel like political conversation used to be almost like, it used to be more taboo than it is now. Like I feel like now it's so open, right? Like people talk about like even just at school or like over lunch, or people just talk about politics, versus like I feel like even before we were born, like political conversation like in the workplace or in the classroom, it was considered just like something you kept to yourself and something you kept within your family. So I think that in a way we are sharing more, but I think we're definitely listening less.
Oh, that's a really good point. Yeah, the abundance of these discussions has definitely increased. You know, on YouTube, like look at the trending section on any given day, and like at least in the top 10 there's going to be like one or two political videos. But if you click on those videos, like the two parties aren't listening to each other. The title is usually something like XYZ demolishes this person from contrary party, like watch to see more, and the thumbnail is like an explosion with like literal war images, just polarizing people more. So yeah, I think people are discussing, but they're discussing with the wrong intention. The intention is not to listen.
Yeah, so I think like we talk about like civil discourse and we talk about like civil discussion, but I feel like we should almost more be advocating for like listening rather than talking more.
Yeah, that
Because when people talk about like, you know, communicating with the other side, they usually mean just like, you know, having conversations, but what we really need to do is actually like listen to the other side more.
Yeah, no, that whole phrase, civil discourse, like it just implies disagreement. Like the phrase itself, like you can't just add civil to something that's inherently taking away from the aspect of listening in an argument. Like you can't, like just adding the word civil doesn't mean that you guys are getting your ideas across better.
Yeah, that's true.
Yeah, how many, like, there's so many times, at least not as much now ever since I read that book, but in the past where I'd be talking to someone and like they say something and I literally don't know what they said because I'm so caught up in what I'm going to say next. And then I say what I'm going to say next and it's completely unrelated. And the conversation is just choppy because I didn't hear what they just said.
Yeah, I think like when we, like, I feel like this definitely talks, like, this happens a lot in politics too. Like, almost we're kind of, even when we're not actually in a formal debate, we're like programmed to debate. Like, when we're listening to someone else, we're not like actually processing their opinion. We're thinking about how we can refute their opinion. Right? And it's like, and also like when they have these kind of political like discussions, like debates, like online, if you see like the presidential debates, whatever, they're expected to respond in like like a few seconds,
Yeah.
right? This one person talks and then the next person immediately fires back
Yeah.
with like an opposite response. But that means like they're not actually listening to the like they just have these pre-planned
Exactly.
like rebuttals, right? But they're not actually hearing out the person's opinion. So there's no way that they could possibly understand. Because if you were to really hear them out, you'd probably take a second and be like, oh, you would process it for a few seconds. You wouldn't immediately fire back with the response,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. No, that's totally true. But I guess unless there's a limited set of arguments, then that's not true. Because if you're saying something, if you're a flat earther and you're giving me another argument that I've already heard about why the earth is flat, like your argument could be like, oh, like the satellite images are faked. And then you could spend 15 minutes talking about how they're fake. But if I know the entire premise of your argument's already false, I think it's fair for me to not listen to you and instead spend that time writing in my notebook about rebuttals so that I can plan my rebuttal better.
So like you're saying if you've already heard the argument and you like know what they're going to say,
Yeah, like
then it's fair not to listen to them.
Yeah.
I feel like that's partially true, but at the same time, like I feel like that kind of leads to like a lot of like it just leads to like less listening because you think like I feel like sometimes you can think you've already heard the argument, but maybe someone will like word it in a different way or they'll present it differently, and it could just be completely different because like the delivery and the way like the logical connections between different points like vary depending on who you're talking to.
Yeah, no, you're right. There's so many times where I've cut someone off and I've said, I know.
Yeah, you think you know what they're gonna say, and they say something completely different.
And that's so embarrassing. If you cut someone off and tell them you know, and then they say what, and then you explain to them something that they were not talking about, that's so embarrassing. Yeah. No, that's definitely a thing that happens. So I'm just trying to find a balance between like always listening to someone and thinking about what you're going to say next. Because if you just never think about what to say next, then like, what are you going to say? Like, you're just going to spend your whole time listening and you're just never going to speak. Then that's also bad. So it's like, where's that balance?
I think a lot of it also is in our culture. Like we're just not, it's not culturally acceptable to take a long pause after someone says something and then respond, if that makes sense. Like it's just not like it's not culturally acceptable to take a few seconds to pause and like process what they're saying. Like if you said something to me and I just sat there for 2 seconds and thought through my response, like you would just think I was a weirdo.
Yeah. That's so true. And also like, if you pause for 2 seconds to think, and I don't know that this is how you speak to me, chances are I'm going to try to fill that awkward gap. And I think that's what's wrong with our culture. It's like be comfortable with silence. Like, okay, 2 people are talking and there's silence. Okay. Like you guys will think of what's going to happen.
There's a whole term like awkward silence.
Yeah, I don't like that term.
Yeah.
I feel like I'm just a slow thinker. Like when I talk to people, like after you said that's true. When I talk to people, like I take a while to think, and personally, there's a lot of times when people will like try to change the topic, and I think it's fair sometimes to just say, hey, no, wait, let me think about that. And I hate that we have to do this, but sometimes filling our pauses with things like like that makes it more culturally acceptable.
Yeah, that's true. Like saying things like and like are like culturally acceptable, but just like being quiet and like not filling the silence is just like very bad.
Yeah. I guess it also has to do with body language. If it looks like you're visually thinking, the other person won't cut you off if they're receptive as well.
That's true. Yeah, do you think that it's do you think that this is a natural thing that humans do, or is it something that we've kind of created because of our cultural need to our need to be accepted? Like humans, like for example, like we have a need to be liked by other people. So we constantly want to just like impress other people, so we're thinking about what we're saying next? Or is this just something that like is kind of natural to us?
I don't know if it's natural to us, because I think part of it might be just based on like texting. You know, when you're Snapchat texting someone and their Bitmojis on the screen, there's like there's like pressure to like respond to them quickly, or they're gonna like swipe away. Is that just me?
Yeah, I mean, I definitely feel that. That's is that the same thing? I guess it is the same thing.
I think it's the same
Like-
thing. Yeah.
Like when you're, yeah, like when you see that, it's like a meme. Like when you see the typing icon, you get like anxious, or whenever
Yeah.
you see you get anxiety,
Yeah.
and like people like it's like rude to like start typing and then stop typing,
Yeah.
and like take a long time to actually type out your response.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I guess I shifted this towards texting. You were talking about like in person, but it's the same thing. If someone's talking to you, it's rude to just stop and just think, because it's like you're not giving them your full attention, even though in your mind you're totally giving them your full attention.
I think it's interesting that you brought this to like texting, because I do think a lot of it has to do with like technology. Like our attention span is like so short now that we like need to be constantly like stimulated. Like our brain needs to be constantly moving, and we can't just like pause in silence for a little bit. Like we have to be saying something or like doing something. And so I think a lot of our like lack of listening probably does come from technology.
How do you feel about like the way boys handle conversation versus the way girls do it? Because when I talk to my guy friends, I feel like it's a lot slower. Like sometimes if you go to like a video game room, people will stretch out the same conversation over like an hour because they're also like playing video games at the same time. And I guess that's a lack of receptiveness because they're doing two things at once, but also just in general, when I talk to my guy friends, it seems like the conversation's slower and almost sometimes even more boring than if I talk to my female friends, where it's like faster.
I think a lot of that is because guys are just not as talkative as girls. I think a lot of it's just like girls like talking. I think that I found that guy friends don't actually talk that much.
Oh, that's so true. Yeah.
Like I will have straight like conversations over like text message. I'll have like deep conversations, like whatever, for like hours. But I feel like guys don't like that happens very rarely. Like it's so I find it so interesting. Like how do guys even make friends? Because so much of their like friendship is just like implied. Like they never say like, man, I love you, bro, or like whatever. They just know. Like I don't know how that works, because like girls, like we always say it out loud, you know?
Yeah, I think a lot of that is also society. Like I mean, like if society tells you like if you express sort of like intimacy with another guy, then that's like then that's gay. Like that's if a girl does that to another girl, if a girl hugs another girl, it's like, oh, like they're showing love to each other. If I did that to another guy, like he would push me off of him, right? And so I think we've just been conditioned to sort of make sure that we show as little emotion as possible, and in doing that we've become so fine-tuned to the external responses, you know, like the shrug of someone's shoulders or their facial expressions. I feel like guys are very attuned to the way other guys respond to them talk, because they don't have that direct, intimate, like verbal speech.
That's so interesting, because like, you know, among girls it's really common to refer to your like friends as girlfriends, but you would never say like, oh, I'm going out with my boyfriend. Like that's just so like they'd be like, you're what?
Yeah.
Your boyfriends? Like, are you gay?
Yeah.
Like that's, but like going like to brunch with your girlfriends is like such a thing. Like it's just normal.
Yeah.
Like I don't know, like how did that even happen? Like are girls just naturally more social? Or like there's even a joke like girls just like all go to the bathroom together. Like one girl's like, I gotta pee, and then I was like, yeah, I want to go too, and then like we all just go to the bathroom together, and then guys are like, I'm gonna pee, like, okay, cool, like just come back and like when you're done.
Yeah. So I don't know if girls are just more social to each other, because when guys talk to girls, they get emotional, right? Like I feel like, well, either if they're really close friends or if they've been in a like long relationship together, like there's usually just a wall that girls have to get past in order to get to the guy's emotions. But once you get past that wall, it's like talking to another girl.
Yeah, that's true. I found that a lot. Like guys just seem they're definitely like colder with their other guy friends. But like once they like talk to a girl, like either a girl, like a girlfriend or like just a friend that's a girl, like they will actually open up a lot more compared to with their guy friends. This is like I feel like a lot of women have a complaint about guys like you act different around your friends or whatever, and it's like a lot of it is because of that.
Yeah. Yeah, like the whole pressure to be like macho around your friends. It's gotten to the point where like some guys will just hide the fact that they have like female friends or like a girlfriend, because it's like, oh, like no, like why would I have a girlfriend? Like I'm not trying to show emotion to her. And then like when they're with their girlfriend, they'll like be sucking on their thumb and like curling up like a little baby. It's like very different.
That's so weird. Like, I feel like when did society like become that way? Because I feel like in like I guess like Victorian, like this year we like read a lot of Victorian literature, and like it was very like common for guys to be like have like romantic gestures towards girls and like describe like how beautiful her eyes were and stuff. But like now it's like you're a simp if you do that. Like if you talk about like how beautiful like your girlfriend is, if you try to make a romantic gesture, like that's just like your guy friends will just like laugh at you.
Yeah. I think honestly, like we can have a whole podcast episode on like these behavioral differences between guys and girls, or like multiple podcast episodes, because I know I can talk about this for hours. But regarding like the whole like compliment thing, I think maybe the reason is because of the abundance of guys. Like the average girl on the daily is getting like probably like five, 6 DMs per like month from like random guys complimenting them like that. So it's come
The Indian guys in my DMs.
yes. Like it's come to the point where like there's such an abundance of that like external like romance that like you have to make up for it by being cold now. At least that's my theory.
There's an abundance of external. What does that mean? Like girls just they're basically like girls get so much attention that you have to like in order to stand out you have to not give her attention, if that's is that what you're saying?
Yeah, I think so.
That's so interesting because I feel like that's true, but also like girls expect guys to come after them. So like how do people even date? Because like no one is.
They don't. Like they're not. Have you seen the articles of like how the rates?
That's true.
They're not.
That's true. Like people are like actually not dating because people just don't know how to communicate with each other.
And like these apps like Bumble and stuff, like they're getting popular because like guys are like, okay, finally the girls are gonna have to message first now.
Oh yeah. That's so. But there's also like another app where I'm pretty sure guys. It's super dumb, but I think like guys have to pay extra, or like, so that I saw it advertising on this YouTube channel that was like, guys have to pay extra, so it's like you filter out like the bad guys or whatever, so like that like if a guy pays to be on this platform, then he's like looking for like a real match or something.
Yeah, it's a similar concept to like I guess like college parties where it's like. If you're a guy and you want to get into the party, it's a lot harder. You have to like bring girls to get into the party. But like if you're a girl, then you can just walk in.
Yeah. So do you think like these dating apps has made communication between guys and girls easier or worse?
Oh, it really depends, because like I think like 10, 15 years ago, it would be the norm to like see someone cute on the street and walk up to them and be like, hi, I'm blah, blah, blah. Like, nice to meet you. Now, if you do that, like...
You're like, they're going to call like 911 just before you.
Yeah, and like I feel like I'm personally, I would much rather do like the in-person thing. Like, and I feel like with the in-person thing, it's so much easier to tell if the guy's a creep or not. Like, it's so much easier.
That's true.
Versus texting, like, you can just have one pickup line that you use on like 20 girls, and like you don't know which one's a creep or not.
Yeah, I think also, like, I think in person, definitely it's, there's a lot, I feel like it feels a lot better, like, especially like, cause like, for like, there's a lot of catfishing and stuff that goes online, like, it's just a lot more safer almost, like, I feel like in person, especially if you're like you're in a public place, like you're in a coffee shop, like what are they gonna do to you, you know? Like versus if you're meeting online and like you want to meet like you want to meet someone in person, like you're like, man, like is they're gonna be like their profile picture, like there's gonna be some like complete weirdo that's like a 50-year-old like just trying to catfish.
I mean, no offense to 50-year-olds. Yeah, no, that's very true. And like the whole like internet bot thing, or like they're not even real people, that's become a thing too. So yeah, I mean, I feel like we should just have a whole another episode about this.
Okay, so I guess we've kind of dwelled on this topic for long enough, so I guess we'll just end the podcast here. Thank you for listening, and be sure to subscribe. We'll see you next time.